these sounds are real. The flute, the piano, all phony, if you want to look at it that way. The flute can play much higher than a flute actually can. And it can do things a flute really couldn't do. And it can play much lower than a flute can play. But that's what synthesis is all about, and that's what it's for. The piano is called sound adaptive synthesis, which is one of Roland's techniques. It's a real good one. But it's after a long line of development. Where it all started, would you ask, would be over here at our friend the analog synthesizer. Analog synthesis is when you have a situation like you did back with the switched-on Bach days of synthesis that is created through just simply controlling voltage. The pre-digital days. There's a synthesizer here called the Roland JX3P, which is an analog synthesizer. And some of the sounds that we're used to hearing on these machines are things like this. And some of you recognize that, of course, as the switched-on Bach sound. Then we have other sounds you'll recognize from the Liszt album. This sound, possibly. And I just used that for Carmina Burana. Here's the sound called Planet. And when they tried to get the sound of real instruments with these, for example, an organ, they could get somewhat close, but the minute they tried to get the sound of something, let's say, like a human voice, it got a little bit funky. So obviously, we had to move on beyond analog synthesis. FM synthesis, which is a form of digital synthesis, could come a lot closer to some of the sounds we were trying to get. Down here is the DX7. It's buried below everything over here, including the Kurzweil and the mixing board. Here's an example of a sound that we would find on this. I called it Star Trek. Maybe if I play a little of it, you'll see why. Okay? It sounds a little bit like a human voice. If we go over to, let's say, a harp, it sounds much more like a harp than we could possibly get out of the analog synthesis, although that still has many, many sounds that are still very, very useful, and which these machines really aren't capable of getting. And one of the problems with all of these keyboards is the fact that you can run out of room real quick, as you can see. That's why I've had to stuff the DX7 underneath here. But the manufacturers came up with a really good answer for that, and that was the little modules, the little guys. These are synthesizers that have no keyboard attached to them. And they actually make very, very big sounds, and some which you would know if you, certainly if you know any of my recordings. Those in a second, the FBO ones. First, the question comes up of how do they get those really realistic sounds? Well, the easiest way to get the really realistic sounds is to use a thing called sampling, where you actually record the sound you want and then use it. The Kurzweil, for example, is quite an expensive piece of equipment that has lots of memory in it and can record sounds. The sound of strings, for example, which is normally very, very hard to get, is very easy here because that's in fact what they've gotten. They've captured the sounds of strings, put it in a chip, and they are now ready to be played on any key you wish. And of course, a lot of these effects can be done with this by simply maybe bending the pitch of the strings. That a string player would find very hard to do. Now, you're probably wondering how we play some of these instruments like these FBO ones up here. How do we get the sounds out of those? There's no keyboard. Well, the reason those are made is because we now can hook in the computer to a synthesizer and work the synthesizer from either directly from the computer or from another keyboard going to the computer, to the module, or from another keyboard going directly to the module. So that you can work it lots of ways, but you do need a computer or a keyboard. But most people working in this field have one of each of those two items. Here's the screen of a program that I just wrote called Keys, and it allows you to do a lot right from the screen with the cursor that you see moving back and forth right now on the screen. So let's keep our attention right on the screen. Now, if I put the cursor over one of the notes, I'll play the beginning by setting it for MIDI channel 7, which I just did. I am going to play these notes here, and they should sound like the beginning of one of the pieces that I have recorded. It's from the Liszt album, the Piano Concerto No. 1. What's happening is I'm clicking on my mouse here, and as I do that, it's setting off the notes that the cursor's over, the little arrow cursor. I could change it to strings if I so desired by just changing the channel that I'm going out on. And I want to just turn down the speaker. And by manipulating it right, I can play a chord on strings. And if I wanted to, I could play the piano. Or if I wanted to, go back to our JX3P, the analog synthesizer, or play our harp on the DX7. So as you can see, just by clicking on a few things up here, that I can do that. You can also pick note types, such as, let's go up here, click on this, and let's pick some eighth notes and play some eighth notes. Let's say a scale. You'll notice that as I click, the music got written, and if I play it, it comes back at us, so that we have used the computer to not only record something, but to write it out at the same time. So the computer is a very, very powerful part of this whole kind of setup or system. It's all done with what's known as MIDI, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Now, so this is how the computer gets inside those modules that we saw. We just simply send the MIDI signal over to those modules from either the computer or another keyboard. Let's use all this power right now and record a commercial. Let's say we have to do a commercial for Pepsi or something like that. We'll do Pepsi. The first thing that would be smart would be to sample the name of the product, Pepsi. So let's do that. Get this set. This is the Casio FC1. It's a 16-bit sampler, and I'm going to say Pepsi into the microphone. Pepsi. See what we got. Pepsi. Not too bad. The reason it sounds different is because I have the signal processing set for reverb and gate, which gives it a particular kind of sound. Now, the way I'm going to use it in my commercial is I'm going to use not just me singing it here, Pepsi, or saying it there, but here, Pepsi, and here, Pepsi. A little higher each time. By playing all three together, Pepsi. We get the sound of maybe three people saying it. It's a little unearthly because it's all three are my voice. Now, the next thing we're going to do is add some drums. We always need drums in a commercial like this. We're going to do kind of a funky thing. And we're going to use a drum machine. This drum machine also uses sampled drum sounds. So we have maybe a snare drum and a bass drum. Something like that, which I'm going to manipulate from the computer. The other thing we need would be a nice, nasty bass sound. So I've set the CZ1 here, the Casio 1, for a sound that sounds like this. And when you play it lower, we get this real funky kind of a bass sound. Now, by going over to the computer, we can allow ourselves the luxury of doing it all from here. And what I've done with my voice is very, very simply this. Here's the drums. You'll see this is the sequencing program. You'll see a list of numbers. That's just the time of each note, the type of each note, whether it's on or not, what the note is, how hard the note was hit, and how long the note was held. These are all columns of data. This is our bass part. And over here are the vocal parts. Now, what I did was, as I said, I used my voice 3 times, and here it is 3 times. I'll play it for you 3 times. Pep. And that's just saying pep. I kind of wanted to do that. I wanted to say pep 3 times. Pep, pep. But much faster than any human being could say it. That makes it, gives it much more that quality of being electronic, which is what I want here. Then down here I let it say Pepsi. 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 It says it twice. Let's hear our commercial. Let's see what it sounds like. Pepsi. 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 Pretty interesting, because it only took maybe about 5 minutes for us to actually put that together. I had prepared a drum part and a bass part before we shot this, but nevertheless, it only took me a couple of seconds to do it. Along the way here, you're wondering why some of the music you hear sounds like it's in an awfully big room, even though this is a very small room. The reason for that is known as a thing called signal processing. Synthesizers will send out a sound, like a flute or a piano or strings, but it'll sound very much like it's in a small room like this, or even in a smaller room. Absolutely no acoustic sense. So they've come up with little boxes called signal processors, like the SDR 1000 here by Ibanez and the Yamaha SPX90, both of them which are called signal processors. One of the processes, and the most used processes, is a thing called echo or reverberation, meaning the sound of a hall. You go into a cave, you have one sound. I might be able to recreate that sound right now with myself talking. Does this put me in a cave? Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty big. If we go over to 4.4 seconds, it's even bigger. Sounds like a subway station. I'll put it back on 2.6 and bring it back down. Now, we can apply this, of course, to instruments. So let's take that harp we had before. That harp's it's harp-like, but if we put it in a bigger room by simply using the mixing board here to turn up that channel's reverb or echo, we have a much bigger sense of a hall, greater sense of a hall. Again, we could add lots of echo to that. Let's take a real interesting effect. Let's go over and get the sound of a tambourine, a very dry sound of a tambourine on the little RX21L here, which is the Yamaha Latin rhythm box. And you'll hear a tambourine, not much of a thrill. We could put it into a bigger hall, like so, which is kind of nice, but let's do something else with the sound. Let's use the SPX90 here, and let's find a thing called stereo echo. And let's start by putting the DX7 through it again, the harp. Okay, and we'll put the harp through it, like so. And what you hear is the harp sounds like it's in maybe the Grand Canyon. You're getting dot-dot-dot-dot-dot, an echo effect. What happens, though, when we do that to our little tambourine here, though? Let's make it greater, the effect of the echo. Sounds a lot like Friday the 13th, doesn't it? For anybody that wants to start this kind of thing, it's very, very simple. Just go out and buy yourself a keyboard and buy yourself a computer and some software, and you're really off and running. You don't need the signal processing right from the start. You don't need the digital mix down. You don't need synchronizing boxes and SMPTE timecode. All you need is a keyboard and a computer and some software. This is a small chamber group, jazz group. What we're going to be doing is using some piano and some bass. The bass is going to be played by our little TX7 that was back in the corner over here. And the flute is going to be played by the CZ1. And the drums are going to be played by our friend over here, RX11. And the piano is going to be played by our friend RD1000, and yours truly playing it. In other words, I'm actually going to play the piano on this one. I guess we're ready to go. Get myself comfortable here so I know what I'm doing. And let's go for it.